Hello, students. Today, I'm coming to you to give you information you will need to do your cause-effect papers. The assignment will be posted soon, but before I post the assignment, not only do I want you to read the chapter, which is chapter 20 in your textbook, Cause and Effect, I want you to have some information about critical thinking. Critical thinking is something that we do every day, but we don't always realize it. It's garnered by many things and mostly our value system. Now, you are going to be writing a cause-effect paper. The most interesting thing about a cause-effect paper is that the cause must be able to produce the effect. And every other cause must be eliminated. So how do we do that? We take a look at what it means to be accurate, truthful, honest, and have integrity. Why do we need truth and accuracy? They are the basis of every relationship that you will ever have, every friendship, every business deal, every job. The one thing you want is fairness with accuracy. That the information not only be true, but presented in the correct context. There must be a clear distinction between news and views. When there isn't, then we have what our current president likes to call fake news. Whatever is only almost true, and this is a quote, is quite false. Any little bit of false information combined with the truth makes the whole thing false. And this is very dangerous because it leads people astray. And those are the words of Howard Ward Beecher. He lived from 1813 to 1887. So let me digress for a minute. You notice how I just gave you information about that quote and the person who said it and something about him? Well, that's documentation. And most of us have forgotten how important documentation is when we are writing a paper. If you do not document, and we use the MLA style, it is in your book, and you should take a look at it, become familiar with it, and every source that you use, every word that you borrow from another author should be documented. And if it is not, as the syllabus promises, you will get an F for that paper. Some of you have voiced the opinion that they don't think documentation or the lack of it is a reason to get an F. Well, that would be like saying that stealing is all right, that you can just go and take someone else's property, pretend that it is yours, get credit for it, and have no consequences. Well, there is such a thing as intellectual property. And most writings that you will find on the internet belong to someone else. It is their intellectual property. And when you use it, you must give them credit for it. You can document using MLA style, which means that you put a parenthetical notation as to where you find it and where it can be found in the works cited page, which you attach at the end of your paper. It doesn't mean that you put your name on this information and turn it in as if it were yours, and then I check it out and find out that it wasn't yours, unless you want to get an F. Because as stated in your syllabus, that is what will happen. Now, we're going to have 2 more papers to write, the cause paper and the argument paper. And the information that I want to give you now will be used in both papers, because in order to make a great argument or to prove your cause and effect, you must use established facts. Now, what are established facts? Facts that can be verified, facts that can be proven, facts that have not been discredited, facts that when you notate them in MLA style, I can go and find it and know that this is the information that you borrowed. Is it okay to paraphrase? Yes, it is. But to paraphrase does not mean that you change a few words in someone else's sentence. That is not making it yours. To paraphrase means that you take someone else's original text and change the presentation altogether to words that you speak. They should not be anything like the words that you borrowed from. But what should remain the same is the overall intent of the information, the truth of it. But in order to prove a good cause-effect relationship, or to persuade someone in your argument, you need established facts. And established facts must always be subject to proof. When we look at our courts, and perhaps some of you are looking at the impeachment hearings that are going on, in America, we have always had the right to be presented evidence against us that is conclusive. Evidence in court should be based on honor, but sometimes we're not always honorable, and that's when problems come in. Eyewitnesses can disagree about what they saw. Why? Because they saw it from different points of view. Time has also passed, and with time, recollection may fade. Not everyone has a photographic memory. Expert witnesses are given authority by their reputation, which again comes down to their honesty and their integrity, and also agreement in the field that they represent. Again, established facts can be verified by a reliable research source or other evidence. It can be proven. They are not simply an opinion. When we look at our courts, evidence in court is based on honor, but we are not always honorable. Eyewitnesses can disagree because they saw the event from two different points of view. With time, recollection also fades. Not everyone has a photographic memory. Expert witnesses are given authority by agreement from the people that they serve and the people in their fields. We like to depend on evidence that cannot be discredited. That is material, physical evidence. This is the most valuable type of established fact. We have something what we call inferences. They are not proven facts. To infer is to assume. So they are assumptions, which still are an opinion that is thought to be true, but it is not necessarily true. It may be widely accepted as true, but it has not been tested or proven. It has merely been assumed based on inductive or deductive reasoning, which is something that we will get to later. However, an inference, when tested, can become an established fact if it proves to be true. Many of us are familiar with the scientific theory of investigation, where we form a hypothesis. This is based on what seems to be true. Then we test that hypothesis. And if it proves true, it becomes an established fact. But there are also inferences that are discredited in that process. We have to be careful. There is also what we call the value judgment. This is another opinion based upon what we value, what we think is worth something. This is based on your personal experience. We attach value based on what we like, our perception of what is good or right. Oh, she is beautiful. Oh, that is nice. These are our own subjective observations, our opinions. They cannot be proven true because they are, again, subjective. What we really look for is the objective observation. When you go to the doctor says, "How do you feel today? What's wrong with you?" And you tell him. And he looks at you and sees what he can observe. All of this is subjective. But when he gives you a blood test and he runs that blood through a panel and different indicators come out, then that is an objective proof of what is wrong with you. So, we take our value judgments seriously, but that doesn't mean that they are true. Although they may have widespread agreement and acceptability. There is also the point of view. The way it seems, the way we saw it, the way we perceived it. This is merely called our perspective. When we look at whether these judgments or assumptions or valid, we relegate them to specific tones. The objective tone is based on fact, material evidence. So we call these established facts. The murder weapon, the bullet in the victim. Subjective is based on our opinions, our assumptions, merely someone's point of view. When you argue, we want to be persuasive. So it is exactly with a causal analysis. Your cause-effect paper wants the reader to accept that this is the cause of the effect. Now, how do we determine that? We make sure that the effect can be the results of the cause. And we rule out every other possible cause. The overall purpose of the cause-effect analysis is to get the reader to agree with your causal analysis. Therefore, you are going to appeal to your reader using each of one or three ways. You can use the logical appeal. This is a rational appeal, and it appeals to the intellect. According to Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, all appeals are based on logic. Ethics are pathos, which is emotions. The best appeal uses more than one, although some people are affected only by the logical appeal. You cannot persuade them with emotions or ethics. It must be rational as well. He also thought that logic alone was not enough to convince an audience. First, the person making the analysis or persuading should be credible, which means you must have the trust of the reader or the listener. This means you must thought to be honest, fair, and responsible to your moral obligations. While this is enough for the average intellectual, it isn't enough for your average audience, which is only moved by their emotions. Logical appeals raise questions. Is the claim factual or reasonable? Is it true or false? Is it practical? Or is it impossible? When it comes to ethics, you also have questions based on morals. Is it just or unjust? Is it honest or dishonest? Is it right or wrong? Ethical appeals speak to your honesty and your integrity, while emotional appeals are designed to evoke an emotional response. These types of appeals use words that inspire empathy or sympathy. We want to be sure that if we use an emotional appeal, that it is based on facts. Facts can be historical, they can be geographical, they can be scientific, but they can never be theoretical, because theory has to be proven. And unless it is a proven fact, it should not be the basis for your appeal as far as a causal analysis or for your argument. Expert opinions change. They are sometimes based on inferences rather than facts. Survey information is only as good as the people who were surveyed. Facts are sometimes overstated or misstated, using language that devalues the fact. We call that stretching the truth. When you have a little bit of truth and very emotional language, this is very dangerous, as Mr. Beecher said. We come to a thing that has plagued many of us for most of our lives, and that is stereotyping. Stereotypes places people in a box. It doesn't allow for true evaluation. The group, whether it's determined by race or culture, are described by the characteristics of the box, whether it is true or false. With repetition and acceptance, stereotypes are seldom tested, but they are accepted as facts because they come from people that we love, people that we trust, people that are in authority. We can avoid these pitfalls by thinking critically, by limiting generalizations. How do we think critically? Well, I've just presented to you established facts, inferences, assumptions of many kinds, including points of view. We want to avoid these things by using concrete words. Then we want to vary our choice of words. In one essay, someone wrote thing at least 10 times. I didn't know what they was talking about because everything was a thing. So this thing didn't describe that thing. So you will not get a good grade for using words that are vague. And forgive me for using so many times. Temper your claim with words like may or might, seem or appear. These words make generalizations more palatable. When you introduce a concept using these words, it is a trigger for the reader to know that you are not making an absolute claim. You are telling the reader that this is something that may be true. And that's okay. But by the same token, if you say all of this is true or none of this is true, and the reader knows of an exception to your claim, then they know that this is a fallacy, that it is not logical, that it does not follow, and you will not get credit for that, okay? These qualifiers, all, none, words like that, are inflexible. All means all, none means none. Use them only when it is truth, without exception. When you're asked to draw a conclusion, you're being asked to infer, and that's okay, because that is what you are being asked. But do not use an inference to answer a question that asks for an established fact. You wrote an essay about comparing two women, and one was a singer and one was an actor. Well, that was an illogical comparison. You can say you're comparing two people that are famous, but are they equally famous? I don't think so. It would be better to, unless you supplied statistics to prove that they're equally or unequally famous, and that is what your comparison is based on. However, if you're going to compare two women who are actors and singers, or just actors, that is a good choice. When you are asked to write a reaction or to interpret a fact, learn to identify and use the different types of information that we have talked about. Are you being asked to draw a conclusion with regard to an established fact or to a value judgment? The difference in your response would be simply this. If it's a value judgment, then you can respond with a value judgment. If it's an established fact, your response must be more concrete, and you should use other established facts in your response. There are some words that trigger or should trigger your assessment of the information that you're being given. Words like theory or conjecture or indicate or probably. These are all keys that you're dealing with an inference, a value judgment, a point of view, rather than an established fact. I want to tell you a little bit about fallacies. Fallacies are errors in judgment. The definition of a fallacy is that a fallacy is an assumption based in fact, but not actually factual. The fact is cheated because language is used to give it a bravado twist or an overdose of emotions to beguile the audience without ethics. So fallacies are basically an emotional appeal. Some of you have appealed to me emotionally, and when I am not affected by that, you are frustrated. That is because you must know your reader. And if your reader is not affected by an emotional appeal, it doesn't mean that you cannot use it, but you must use established fact. Prove your established fact. Then bring in your emotional appeal. Not as new information, but information that you have presented that you can restate in an emotional way. Many of you have failed when it comes to your conclusion because you want to give new information in the conclusion. There is no new information in the conclusion of any paper. You must present your thesis. Your thesis should have your topic and your purpose included in it. It should not be vague. It should be something that is clearly stated and apparent. Something that I do not have to figure out what you are talking about. Just because you say to me, I'm going to talk about this, don't mean that you did. Once I read the paper, I must be able to conclude, okay, They really did talk about that. They really did put their purpose forth and restated it very well. They supported their thesis with accurate information, and I agree with their causal analysis. Another thing that I want to point out, some of you have been writing personal papers. I did this, I did that. The causal analysis is not a personal paper. It is a third person paper. It is an impersonal paper. You want to have a causal analysis and put it in the third person. If you need to write it out as a first draft in the first person, that is fine. But by the time you turn your final draft into me, it should not be a personal testimony. One of the issues I have with papers is that sometimes writers want to write about the information that is very personal to them. But then they get to the middle of the paper and they don't want to reveal the personal information. Then your paper becomes vague. That is not a good idea. Now, there are two types of fallacies that we are basically concerned with. And that is what we call the post hoc fallacy. And the post hoc fallacy is in your book on page 475. And it has to do with chronology. Something happens at the same time, and we assume that one causes the other when it may not be true. For example, I sent my car to be fixed. They said it needed a clutch. And the flywheel went bad. So they say the clutch made the flywheel go bad. And because they went bad at the same time. So it would seem that one caused the other. But when the mechanic got in, he saw that there was a missing part inside that had caused both of them to go bad. So the post hoc fallacy is based on an assumption of two events happening chronologically close or at the same time, so that it appears as if one causes the other, but there is a third variable that causes one or maybe both of them. The other fallacy that we are concerned with is the non sequitur. The non sequitur is Latin for, I think it's Latin or French, for it does not follow. The logic does not follow. That means that it happens sort of with predictions. If this is so, then that's so. If the temperature drops, there's going to be ice on the streets. Not necessarily, because if there was no rain or no water or snow melting, the streets will not have ice. So the logic must be reasonable, something that you can follow. Now, it says in your text on page, I think, 473, every time you answer a question that asks why, you engage in a causal analysis. You try to determine a cause or series of causes for a particular effect. You will be using the causal analysis not only in your academic career, but in your work. You will draw conclusions, you will make inferences, you will make assumptions based on the information that is given you. However, you must be truthful and honest and not present them as an established fact. Present them for what they are, an analysis. Thank you for listening, and I hope I said something that will help you complete your cause of paper. Remember that a cause-effect relationship is established when the cause can produce the effect and all other causes have been eliminated. Read chapter 20 and ask me any questions you might have for this assignment in the discussion forum before Sunday night. In order to write your causal analysis paper, your claim must be approved. So after you finish listening to this video, submit your claim and I will approve it by this Monday, and it will be due on Thursday. Thank you.